She was thrown out of her own home, branded barren, cursed, and worthless. He thought he had destroyed her forever. But on the day of his grand wedding, when the chandeliers glowed and the cameras flashed, she walked in, radiant, unbroken, and holding 3 little hands. The hall fell silent. And what happened next shook everyone to the core. The storm outside the penthouse rattled the tall glass windows of Manhattan, but inside, the storm was far worse. Calvin Brooks, one of New York's most recognized real estate moguls, had just returned from a gala. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor, the faint smell of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He loosened his tie with irritation, tossing his keys onto the mahogany dresser with a loud clang. Calvin had everything: money, power, fame. His name was in newspapers, his face often on television, his company logo shining across billboards on Times Square. Yet none of it brought him peace. The one thing he wanted more than anything else, an heir to carry his name, remained absent. His wife, Naomi Carter Brooks, sat silently on the edge of their California king bed. Her delicate fingers clutched a rosary, her soft brown eyes filled with unspoken pain. Naomi had been married to Calvin for nearly 10 years. She had once been the light in his darkest hours, back when he had no skyscrapers, no millions, no empire. Back then, she loved him for who he was, not for what he had. But now, that love seemed invisible to him. To Calvin, her worth had been reduced to one thing: her ability to bear children. 10 years, Naomi. Calvin's voice thundered through the penthouse like rolling thunder. 10 years of waiting and still no child. Do you want me to die without an heir? Naomi flinched at the sharpness of his tone. She raised her eyes slowly, tears glistening under the dim chandelier light. Calvin, her voice trembled. I've tried. We've tried. Maybe there's another specialist we can see. Maybe God hasn't forgotten us yet. But Calvin only let out a bitter laugh, the kind that pierced deeper than any insult. Hope? That's what you've been clinging to? While my mother calls me a failure every week, while my friends whisper that I'm less of a man. Do you know the humiliation of being mocked for not having a son? His voice cracked, but it wasn't from pain. It was pride wounded by ego. Naomi's lips shook as she whispered, "Please don't speak like that. I'm your wife. We vowed before God, through sickness and health, better or worse. Why do you treat me as though I am a burden?" Calvin's eyes hardened like stone. He paced the room, his hands clenched, his Rolex catching the lightning flash outside. Because you are nothing to me now. What is a wife who cannot give her husband children? You enjoy my wealth, live in this luxury, wear these gowns, but you give me nothing in return. You are a curse, Naomi. Naomi gasped as if struck across the face. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor. Her hands shook as she clasped them together. Don't call me that. I've prayed every night, Calvin. I've begged God to bless us. Do you think I don't feel this emptiness too? Do you think I don't ache every time I see a child? But Calvin turned away, his pride too large to see her pain. Enough of your tears. I've wasted enough years. Tomorrow morning, I'll call my lawyer. This marriage is over. Naomi's eyes widened in shock, her breath caught in her throat. A divorce? After everything I've sacrificed? After standing by you when you had nothing? After leaving my family for you? You'll throw me away like garbage? Calvin's jaw tightened. He refused to look at her, afraid that the sight of her brokenness might weaken his resolve. He lifted his phone and dialed. Yes, he said coldly, prepare the divorce papers. I want them by tomorrow morning. Naomi stared at him in disbelief, her tears falling freely. You planned this all along? Calvin's voice was sharp, final. I should have left you years ago. You have wasted my time, Naomi. Pack your things. By tomorrow, I don't want to see you in this house again. Naomi's trembling hands reached for his trouser leg, clinging desperately. Calvin, please, don't do this. Give me more time. Give us more time. God can still answer, but Calvin yanked his leg away, as though her touch disgusted him. God has nothing to do with this. You are the problem. And I am done. Her body shook violently, her tears dripping onto the marble. But Calvin remained unmoved. He crossed his arms and watched as she stood weakly, her legs trembling beneath her. Slowly, Naomi walked to the wardrobe. Each dress she folded into her small suitcase carried years of memories. Holidays, anniversaries, late-night dinners when they had nothing but each other. Now each memory felt like a cruel lie. Calvin stood silently, arms crossed, his expression void of emotion. He didn't move to stop her, didn't soften, didn't blink. When Naomi finally zipped her bag, she turned to him one last time. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice came out steady, almost prophetic. "Calvin, one day you will regret this. One day the truth will come to light, and you will understand what you've done." But Calvin turned away, staring out the window as if she were already gone. Naomi's slippers scraped softly against the floor as she walked through the long hallway. The maids bowed their heads, whispering in pity but not daring to intervene. She pushed open the tall glass doors, and the cold night air hit her face like a slap. She paused at the edge of the marble steps, looking back once more at the towering skyscraper she had called home for nearly a decade. Her chest ached, but her spirit whispered something different. "I may leave with nothing," she murmured to herself, "but I will not remain broken. My God will fight for me." With her suitcase clutched tightly and her heart heavy, Naomi stepped into the darkness of Manhattan. The city lights glittered around her. The sounds of taxis honking and vendors shouting filled the streets. But to Naomi, the world was silent. Her marriage was gone. Her dreams of motherhood shattered. Her dignity stripped. And yet, in the quietest corner of her soul, something stirred, a promise that her story was not over. That night, under the flickering street lamps, Naomi walked without direction. Past sleeping dogs curled near storefronts, past women closing their fruit stalls, past men who didn't even glance at the broken woman carrying a single bag. To the world, she was invisible. But to herself, she whispered one final vow as the city swallowed her figure. "This is not the end of my story." The neon lights of Manhattan flickered above the streets as Naomi Carter Brooks wandered aimlessly, clutching her small suitcase against her chest. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, her heart felt like shattered glass, and yet her feet kept moving. She had no plan, no clear destination, only the instinct to keep walking, to escape the ghost of Calvin's last words that still echoed in her ears. "You are nothing. You are a curse. By tomorrow I don't want to see you here." Every step felt heavier than the last. Her slippers slapped softly against the wet pavement, the chill of late-night mist settling on her skin. The glamorous city that had once seemed so alive now looked like a jungle of strangers. Bright billboards, honking taxis, and chatter from street vendors filled the air, but to Naomi the world had fallen into silence. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. She walked past a bakery where the smell of fresh bagels wafted through the air, reminding her of Saturday mornings when she used to bake cinnamon rolls for Calvin, back when he still smiled at her. Past a boutique where she once shopped for his ties, carefully choosing colors that made his eyes stand out. Every corner of the city whispered memories she wished she could erase. By the time she reached the quieter side streets, her knees buckled. She sat on a stone step outside a shuttered bookstore, her suitcase beside her. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed silently, afraid the city itself might mock her if she cried too loud. But in that moment of despair, a thought pierced through the darkness. Amelia Torres. Amelia had been Naomi's closest friend since their college days at NYU. They had laughed together in cramped dorm rooms, shared secrets during late-night pizza runs, and promised that no matter where life took them, they'd always have each other's backs. Though they had drifted apart in recent years, Naomi, swallowed by Calvin's world of business dinners and charity. Galas, Amelia's warmth was still the one place she could imagine seeking refuge. Naomi wiped her tears with the back of her hand, stood shakily, and dragged her suitcase along the cracked sidewalk. Amelia lived in a modest neighborhood in Queens, far from the glittering towers of Manhattan. The journey felt endless, but desperation lent Naomi strength she didn't know she had. By the time she reached Amelia's apartment complex, it was nearly midnight. The brick building looked ordinary compared to Calvin's penthouse, but to Naomi it glowed with the promise of safety. She hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the buzzer. Shame twisted inside her. Would Amelia pity her? Would she judge her for failing as a wife? For being cast out? Finally, Naomi pressed the buzzer. A few seconds later, the intercom crackled. "Who is it?" Amelia's voice sounded groggy but familiar. Naomi's voice trembled. It's me, Naomi." There was a pause, then the sound of quick footsteps. The door swung open and Amelia stood there in her pajama pants and messy bun, her eyes widening in shock. "Naomi! Oh my God, what happened to you?" Amelia rushed forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. Naomi broke down, sobbing into her friend's shoulder, the weight of the night finally crashing over her. Amelia guided her inside the small but cozy apartment, helping her to sit on the couch. "Talk to me," she said gently, kneeling beside her. "What happened? Did someone hurt you?" Naomi shook her head, wiping her swollen eyes. Her voice came out as a whisper, broken and raw. "Calvin threw me out. He said I was worthless. He said it was a curse." Amelia's mouth fell open, fury flashing in her eyes. "That man, that arrogant, cold-hearted—" She stopped herself, placing a hand on Naomi's trembling fingers. "Naomi, listen to me. You are not a curse. You are one of the most loving, beautiful souls I've ever known. Don't you dare let his poison make you believe otherwise." Naomi's tears spilled over again. 10 years, Amelia. 10 years I prayed, I waited, and now he's divorcing me because I couldn't give him a child. He called his lawyer right in front of me. He planned it. Like I was nothing. Amelia pulled her into another hug, rocking her gently. "That man never deserved you. You gave him love when he had nothing. You stood by him while he built his empire. And now he thinks money makes him a god? No, he's a coward. A selfish, blind coward who will one day choke on his pride." Naomi let out a shuddering breath, her body still weak. "I don't know what to do. I have nowhere else to go." "You're staying here," Amelia said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "For as long as you need. My home is your home. We'll figure out the rest later." Naomi's lips quivered as she whispered, "Thank you." Amelia smiled through her own anger. "You don't need to thank me. This is what sisters do." That night, Amelia made her a cup of chamomile tea and laid out fresh sheets on the guest bed. But even as Naomi lay in the warmth of her friend's small apartment, her mind replayed every cruel word Calvin had thrown at her. She stared at the ceiling long after midnight, her pillow damp with tears. When dawn broke, the city outside came alive with the sound of buses and schoolchildren, but Naomi remained curled on the bed. She felt as though the world had ended. Days passed in a blur. Naomi stayed in Amelia's apartment, silent and withdrawn. She barely ate, barely spoke, staring out the window for hours as if waiting for something to change. Amelia tried everything to cheer her up, movies, long walks, even silly jokes, but the wound was too deep. One morning, Amelia sat beside her with a serious look. "Naomi, I've been thinking. Did Calvin ever get himself tested?" Naomi blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" Amelia tilted her head. "For fertility. Did he ever check if he was the problem?" Naomi shook her head slowly. "He refused. He always said it was me. His mother said it too. Everyone blamed me." Amelia's jaw tightened. "Unbelievable. You mean to tell me that arrogant man never once considered he might be the issue?" Naomi's voice cracked. "I didn't have a choice. He wouldn't listen, and I believed him." Amelia placed a hand on her shoulder. "No more. Tomorrow we're going to a doctor. We'll run every test. You deserve to know the truth, Naomi, not Calvin's version. Not his mother's, the truth." Naomi's eyes filled with hesitation, fear twisting in her chest. But deep down, something flickered, curiosity, maybe even hope. The next morning they went to a private clinic in Queens. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic, the walls painted in pale blue. Naomi's hands shook as she filled out the forms. The memories of Calvin's words haunted her. "You're barren. You're cursed." Hours passed as she went through blood work, hormone tests, ultrasounds. She could barely breathe, afraid the results would confirm Calvin's accusations. 2 days later, she sat nervously in the doctor's office, Amelia beside her. Dr. Howard, a kind-eyed physician in his 40s, flipped through the test results. Then he looked up, smiling gently. "Naomi, I want you to listen carefully. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your reproductive system is healthy. Your hormone levels are normal. You are perfectly capable of having children." Naomi's breath caught. Her mind spun. You mean I'm not barren?" Dr. Howard shook his head. "Not at all. If you didn't conceive in 10 years, I strongly suggest your husband be tested. From what I see, the issue was never you." Naomi's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Amelia leapt from her chair, her eyes blazing. "I knew it. That man lied to you all these years. He blamed you just to protect his pride." Naomi sobbed uncontrollably, a strange mixture of grief and relief flooding her. All those nights she had cried herself to sleep, all those years she had hated herself, wasted. She was never the problem. When they stepped out of the clinic, Naomi sat on a bench, her body shaking from the weight of the truth. She whispered through her tears, "All these years, I begged God. I thought I was broken. And it wasn't me." Amelia sat beside her, squeezing her hand. "Naomi, listen to me. One day, that man will see the truth. And when he does, he will regret every cruel word he ever spoke to you." Naomi lifted her tear-streaked face to the sky, the morning sun breaking through the clouds. For the first time in years, she didn't feel cursed. She felt the stirrings of something new, healing. That night, lying in Amelia's apartment, Naomi whispered to herself, "This is not the end of my story. This is only the beginning." The days that followed Naomi's hospital visit were unlike any she had known in years. For the first time, she woke up without the heavy burden of self-hatred that Calvin had planted in her heart. Yet the emptiness was still there, like a wound healing slowly. One layer at a time, she sat by the window of Amelia's modest apartment most mornings, sipping tea from a chipped mug, staring out at the small park across the street. Children played tag, mothers pushed strollers, fathers tossed footballs with their sons. Each laugh echoed into Naomi's chest like both a promise and a reminder. A promise that she was not broken, but also a reminder of the years stolen from her. Amelia often found her there, lost in thought. "Naomi," she said one morning, setting down a basket of laundry, "you can't spend the rest of your life looking out of that window." Naomi smiled faintly. "I don't know what else to do. For so long, my life was about Calvin, being the wife he wanted, fitting into the world he created. Now that he's gone, I don't know who I am anymore." Amelia sat across from her, her tone firm but kind. "Then it's time to find out. Time to build something that's yours, not his." Naomi looked down at her hands. They were slender but strong, calloused slightly from years of cooking, sewing and gardening. "I always loved cooking," she said softly. "When I was a little girl, I dreamed of owning a small diner, a place where people could come in, eat a warm meal and feel at home. But with Calvin, there was never time. He wanted dinners at 5-star restaurants, not in a kitchen filled with love." Amelia's eyes lit up. "Then let's start there. You have a gift, Naomi. I've tasted your food 100 times. Remember those chicken pot pies you used to make in college?" Everyone begged for seconds. "Why not start small, right here in Queens?" Naomi hesitated. The thought of being seen again, of facing the world after her humiliation, filled her with fear. "People will know me as the woman Calvin Brooks threw away." "They'll whisper." "Let them whisper," Amelia said sharply. "They whispered when you stayed with him. They whispered when you had no children. They'll whisper when you succeed. The only voice that matters is your own." That night, Naomi lay awake in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Amelia's words echoed in her mind. The only voice that matters is your own. For the first time in years, Naomi began to imagine a life that wasn't defined by Calvin's shadow. The very next week, with Amelia's encouragement, Naomi set up a small food stand outside the apartment building. It wasn't much, just a folding table, a couple of pans, and a bright red umbrella to shield her from the sun. But as she stirred her grandmother's secret stew recipe in a large pot, a sense of peace washed over her. By noon, the aroma of simmering herbs and spices floated down the street, drawing curious passers-by. A construction worker was the first to stop. "Smells good," he said, pulling out a few bills. "What you got there?" Naomi served him a plate of hearty stew with rice. He took one bite, closed his eyes, and let out a satisfied groan. "Lady, this is better than anything I've eaten in months. You'll see me tomorrow." Word spread quickly. By the end of the week, Naomi's stand had a small line every morning. Office workers, bus drivers, even children on their way to school. They didn't know her as Calvin Brooks' discarded wife. They knew her as the woman who served the best comfort food in Queens. One evening, after a long day, Naomi counted her earnings. It wasn't much compared to the riches she once lived with, but it was honest. It was hers. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Amelia clapped her hands with joy. "See, didn't I tell you? This is just the beginning." Naomi smiled, but deep inside she still feared the shadow of her past. She still remembered the night Calvin told her she was nothing. She still remembered the look in his eyes when he dismissed her. It was on one of those ordinary afternoons, while Naomi was ladling stew into a container for a customer, that her life took an unexpected turn. 2 plates. "Please," a man's voice said gently. Naomi looked up. Standing before her was a tall man with warm brown eyes and a calm presence. He wore a crisp white shirt tucked neatly into khaki trousers, carrying a leather laptop bag over his shoulder. His smile was small but genuine, the kind that instantly made people feel at ease. "Of course," Naomi replied, her voice soft. "Would you like it spicy or mild?" "Spicy," the man said with a chuckle. "I like my food to fight back." Naomi's lips curved into a small smile, her first real smile in weeks. She filled the containers and handed them over. "That'll be $12. The man handed her a 20. "Keep the change," he said. "Food this good is worth more." Naomi blinked in surprise. "Thank you. My name's Ethan Walker," he added, offering a polite nod. "I work at the law firm down the block. I'll be coming by often, I think." Naomi gave a hesitant smile. "I'll be here?" And just like that, Ethan became a regular. Day after day, Ethan stopped by her food stand. Sometimes he bought 2 plates, sometimes just 1. He always made a little joke, shared a funny story from work, or asked Naomi how her day was going. He never stayed long, never pushed for conversation, but he always left her smiling, something she hadn't thought she could do again. One quiet afternoon, when the line had disappeared, Ethan lingered a little longer. He sat on a bench near her stand, sipping from a soda can. "You work too hard," he said, watching her wipe down the table. "Do you ever take a break?" Naomi shrugged. "Not really. When I get home, I rest." "Still," Ethan said thoughtfully, "you shouldn't have to do all this alone." He hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you married?" Naomi's heart skipped. Her hand froze on the cloth. She looked down. Ethan's face softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up something painful. It's not your fault," Naomi said quietly. She didn't elaborate, but her silence spoke volumes. Ethan nodded, respecting the unspoken boundary. "For what it's worth, you seem like someone with a good heart. Strong, too." "I admire that." Naomi looked at him for a moment, unsure how to respond. Then she gave a small nod. "Thank you." He smiled, stood, and walked away, leaving Naomi with a strange warmth in her chest. That evening, back at Amelia's apartment, Amelia raised her brows mischievously. "So, who's the man who keeps coming to your stand?" Naomi rolled her eyes. "He's just a customer," Amelia smirked. "Uh-huh, a very consistent customer. With very kind eyes." Naomi shook her head, but deep inside she couldn't deny it. Something about Ethan was different. His presence wasn't heavy, demanding, or suffocating like Calvin's. It was gentle, steady, like a safe harbor after a long storm. That night, as she lay in bed, Naomi closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't think of Calvin's harsh words. She thought of Ethan's calm smile, the way he said, "I admire that." And slowly, like dawn breaking after a long, endless night, Naomi began to feel something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Naomi's life began to take on a rhythm. Each morning, she rose before dawn, tied a scarf around her hair, and prepared large pots of stew, rice, and bread for her food stand. The aroma drifted down the street before the sun fully rose, pulling in tired workers and busy mothers like a magnet. Her hands worked tirelessly, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Ethan Walker became part of that rhythm. At first, he came every few days. Then it became daily. Sometimes he arrived early, catching her just as she was setting up, offering to carry the heavy pots from Amelia's kitchen to the stand. Other times, he lingered longer than he needed to, chatting casually while Naomi served customers. And each time, Naomi noticed something about him, the way his eyes softened when he listened, the way he never pushed her to talk, the way he respected her silence. One afternoon, after a long rush of customers, Naomi found Ethan waiting at the edge of the line. He had his sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened from a long day at the firm. "Looks like business is booming," he said with a smile. Naomi wiped sweat from her brow. "It's exhausting, but I can't complain. People keep coming back. They don't just come for the food," Ethan replied gently. "They come for you." Naomi frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. Ethan shrugged. "You have this calmness about you. People feel it when they're near you. It makes them want to stay." Her cheeks warmed, and she quickly looked down at the pot she was stirring. Compliments were something Calvin never gave, at least not without strings attached. Ethan's words felt different. They weren't manipulative. They were simple, honest. Before she could respond, a group of teenagers ran past, nearly knocking over the stand. Naomi stumbled, but Ethan's hand shot out, steadying the table. His touch was firm, reassuring. "Careful," he said softly. "You've built something special here. Don't let anyone shake it." Naomi looked at him for a long moment, her heart pounding. She whispered, "Thank you." That evening, back at Amelia's apartment, Amelia wasted no time teasing her. "Ethan helped again, didn't he?" she asked, wagging her brows as she folded laundry. Naomi rolled her eyes. "He was just being polite." "Don't start imagining things," Amelia smirked. "Polite men don't come every single day to the same food stand. They don't carry pots or stand around waiting for the rush to end." "That man's interested, Naomi." Naomi's stomach twisted. The idea of letting another man close terrified her. The scars Calvin left were still raw. She shook her head firmly. "I can't. Amelia, I'm not ready. What if I'm wrong again? What if I let someone in and they destroy me the way Calvin did?" Amelia sat beside her, taking her hand. "Naomi, not every man is Calvin. You can't let one man's cruelty convince you that love itself is evil. You deserve to be happy." Naomi looked down at her lap, whispering, "I don't know if I believe that yet." Over the next few weeks, Ethan's presence became impossible to ignore. He didn't overwhelm her with grand gestures, but little things, bringing her bottled water on hot days, dropping off fresh vegetables he bought from the market, or simply standing by the stand to keep her company when business slowed down. One afternoon, when the sun was dipping low, Naomi finally asked, "Why do you keep coming here, Ethan? Surely you have other places to eat." Ethan chuckled softly. "I like the food. But more than that, I like being here." He hesitated, then added, "with you." Naomi's breath caught. She turned away, pretending to rearrange plates. "You don't know me?" she murmured. "I'd like to," Ethan said gently. His tone carried no pressure, only quiet sincerity. Naomi didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her mind was a battlefield of doubts. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, memories of Calvin invaded her thoughts. His voice calling her barren, worthless. His cold eyes as he told her to leave. Naomi curled into herself, clutching her pillow. But then Ethan's voice slipped through the darkness. "You have a calmness about you. People feel it when they're near you." She thought of his warm smile, his steady hand catching the table before it toppled. Slowly her heartbeat steadied. For the first time, the memory of a man didn't leave her trembling, it left her wondering. A week later, Ethan surprised her. He came not for food, but with a bouquet of sunflowers. Naomi blinked at the bright yellow blooms, her hands frozen in midair. "I thought you could use a little sunshine," Ethan said with a sheepish grin. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. Just a small gift." Naomi stared at the flowers. Calvin had never once brought her flowers. Not when they married, not on anniversaries, not even after fights. She swallowed hard, her voice cracking. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, Ethan replied. Just smile, that'll be enough. To her own surprise, Naomi did smile, a real unguarded smile. As autumn turned the leaves golden in Queens, Ethan and Naomi's bond deepened. They began sharing small moments beyond the food stand. A walk through the park on Sunday afternoons. Coffee at a corner cafe after closing her stand. Quiet conversations on a bench while the city hummed around them. One evening, as they walked by the East River, Naomi finally opened up. Her voice trembled, but Ethan listened without interruption as she told him everything. Calvin's cruelty, the years of blame, the divorce, the doctor's revelation. When she finished, she was shaking, tears threatening to fall. Ethan stopped walking. He turned to her, his eyes full of compassion. Naomi, I'm so sorry you went through that. No one deserves to be treated like that. She tried to smile through her tears. I feel foolish. I stayed too long. I believed his lies. Ethan shook his head. No, you loved him. That's not foolishness, it's trust. He betrayed that trust, not you. And what I see standing before me now isn't a broken woman. It's someone strong enough to rise from ashes. Naomi's chest ached. But this time, it wasn't from pain. It was from the way his words filled the hollow spaces inside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel cursed. She felt seen. As they stood by the water, the city lights shimmering around them, Naomi whispered, I don't know if I'm ready to trust again. Ethan's voice was soft, steady. Then I'll wait. I'm not here to rush you, Naomi. I'm here because you make the world feel peaceful again. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Naomi looked at him, her eyes wet, her heart trembling. And for the first time, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be something different than pain. The chill of winter slowly crept into Queens. The trees that once stood ablaze in gold and crimson were now stripped bare, their branches clawing at the grey sky. Naomi's food stand was wrapped in the comforting scent of soups and stews, the kind that warmed hands and hearts in the cold air. Business didn't stop, it grew. Office workers lined up wrapped in scarves, their breath fogging in the air, waiting for Naomi's food. But beyond the food, something else was changing. Naomi herself. The woman who once stared endlessly out of Amelia's window, hollow and broken, now stood taller. She smiled more often, even if faintly. She laughed sometimes, catching herself off guard. And every day, when Ethan Walker stopped by, it was as if the pieces of her soul were slowly stitching themselves back together. Ethan had become part of Naomi's world in ways neither of them had planned. At first, he was a customer, then a helper. Now, he was a presence she looked forward to each morning. One frigid afternoon, when the last of the customers had left, Ethan approached her stand carrying a thermos. He set it down gently on the table. What's this? Naomi asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Hot cocoa, Ethan said with a grin. I figured you're always serving everyone else, but who serves you? Naomi blinked, her throat tightening. She took the thermos, her hands brushing against his. A spark shot through her chest, quick and unexpected. She quickly pulled back, clutching the cup. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Ethan interrupted softly. His eyes met hers, steady and calm. You do so much for everyone. Someone should do something for you. Naomi sipped the cocoa. It was warm, sweet, comforting. She looked away, trying to hide the tears that threatened her eyes. Calvin had never once thought about such small kindnesses. To him, love had been a transaction. But Ethan was different. That night, back at Amelia's apartment, Naomi sat with the thermos on her lap, long after it was empty. Amelia walked in and smirked. He's getting to you, isn't he? Naomi rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed. He's just kind. That's all. Amelia raised a brow. Naomi, kindness isn't just anything. You've lived without it for so long that you don't realize how rare it is. Naomi hugged the thermos tighter, whispering, I'm scared, Amelia. What if I let him in and it all falls apart again? What if I'm not enough? What if I choose wrong again? Amelia sat beside her, taking her hand. Naomi, listen to me. You didn't fail with Calvin. He failed you. You can't punish yourself forever for another person's cruelty. If Ethan is who he seems to be, then maybe God is finally giving you back what you lost. But you'll never know unless you let yourself live again. Naomi closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time she whispered the thought she hadn't dared speak aloud. What if I deserve to be happy? Amelia squeezed her hand. You do. You always did. The following weeks brought more change. Ethan began stopping by not only for food, but to help Naomi carry supplies, fix broken crates, and even set up a better sign for her stand. One afternoon, as he hammered nails into the wooden frame of the sign, Naomi leaned against the table watching him. You're handy, she said. Amused, Ethan grinned, glancing at her. Law school didn't pay much at first. I used to build furniture on the side to get by. Naomi chuckled. So you're a lawyer and a handyman? Let's just say I like solving problems, Ethan replied, his eyes locking on hers meaningfully. Naomi's heart skipped. She quickly turned to stir the pot, her face warm. One Sunday, Ethan invited her to take a walk with him at the park. Naomi hesitated but agreed. They strolled along the frosted paths, children skating by, couples sipping coffee on benches. Ethan walked beside her, not too close, not too far. Naomi, he said after a long silence, I know you've been through hell. I won't pretend to understand all of it, but I can see it in your eyes. You carry pain, but you also carry strength. Naomi's steps slowed. Her chest tightened. I'm not asking for anything, Ethan continued, his voice gentle. I just want you to know. You don't have to carry it alone. Not anymore. Naomi stopped walking. Her breath came out in clouds. She turned to him, her eyes wet. Why me, Ethan? Out of everyone in this city, why me? Ethan smiled softly. Because you're real. You're not pretending. You've been broken, but you didn't stay broken. That kind of strength. It's rare, and it's beautiful. Tears rolled down Naomi's cheeks. For years, she had been called barren, worthless, cursed. And now here was a man telling her she was strong, beautiful, real. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't. She simply let herself cry, and for the first time her tears weren't from pain. They were from relief. Ethan didn't reach to wipe them away. He simply stood with her, his presence solid, letting her know she wasn't alone. Over the following months, Naomi and Ethan's bond deepened. Slowly, cautiously, Naomi allowed herself to trust again. She invited him for dinner at Amelia's apartment, cooking dishes she hadn't made in years. He told her stories of his childhood in Ohio, about losing his wife in a tragic accident years ago, about how he thought he'd never love again. I buried myself in work, Ethan admitted one evening, staring into his coffee. I thought love was over for me. Until I met you, Naomi's breath caught. She whispered, Ethan, I'm scared. I know, he said softly. And that's okay. I'm not asking you to stop being scared. I'm just asking you to let me stand beside you while you heal. Naomi looked at him, really looked at him, the honesty in his eyes, the quiet strength in his voice. For the first time in years, she felt something rise inside her, something Calvin had beaten down, until it was almost gone. Hope. Spring came, and with it, new beginnings. Naomi's food stand became so popular that Ethan helped her lease a small shop. They painted the walls together, built shelves, and set up tables. The sign above the door read simply, Naomi's Kitchen. On opening day, customers filled the space, laughter and the smell of food spilling into the street. Naomi stood behind the counter, overwhelmed with joy. She caught Ethan watching her from the corner, pride in his eyes. Later that night, after the last customer left, Naomi stood in the empty shop, her apron stained, her heart full. Ethan approached her quietly. You did it, he said. Naomi shook her head. We did it, Ethan smiled. Slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, warm and steady. Naomi's voice trembled. I don't know what tomorrow holds. But tonight, I feel alive again. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. That's all that matters. For the first time in a long, long time, Naomi felt not just alive, but free. And somewhere deep inside, a seed was planted. A seed of love, fragile yet powerful, ready to bloom when the time was right. Naomi's kitchen had been open for only a few months, yet it had already become a landmark in the neighborhood. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread, stew simmering with herbs, and roasted chicken drifted down the street, drawing customers like bees to honey. Mothers brought their children, construction workers came on their lunch breaks, and even white-collar lawyers from Manhattan took the train just to taste her food. For the first time in her life, Naomi felt she had a place that belonged entirely to her. The cash register filled steadily, her name was whispered with admiration, and customers often left with smiles wider than when they arrived. But more than money or success, Naomi cherished the dignity she had regained. Calvin's words, "You're barren, you're worthless, you're a curse," no longer echoed like a sentence carved into her soul. Now when she lay down at night, she heard Ethan's voice instead. "You've been broken, but you didn't stay broken. That kind of strength, it's rare, and it's beautiful." One spring morning, Naomi woke up feeling unusual. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of Amelia's guest room, and for the first time in weeks, the smell of her own cooking made her nauseous. She brushed it off, thinking maybe she was tired. But the nausea didn't go away. Days passed, and Naomi found herself dizzy, her body heavy with a fatigue she couldn't explain. She dismissed it at first, burying herself in work. But Amelia noticed. "You've been pale all week," Amelia said one evening, setting down a tray of freshly folded napkins. "What's going on with you?" Naomi shook her head, avoiding her eyes. "I'm fine, just overworked." Amelia frowned. "Naomi, don't lie to me, you've barely eaten. And this morning you nearly fainted in the shop. We're going to the doctor tomorrow." Naomi's stomach knotted with dread. She didn't want to face another medical test, another verdict that might rip open old wounds, but Amelia insisted, and the next morning Naomi found herself sitting nervously in a small clinic, the antiseptic smell making her gag. The doctor, a kind, middle-aged woman, asked a series of questions, then ordered some blood work. Naomi sat in silence, her heart pounding as memories of Calvin's cruel accusations clawed at her mind. When the doctor returned, her smile was wide. "Congratulations, Mrs. Brooks," she said warmly. "You're pregnant." Naomi froze, her ears rang. "Pregnant?" she whispered, as if the word itself were foreign. "Yes," the doctor nodded. "About 6 weeks along." Naomi's hand shot to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. For years she had prayed for this moment, for proof that she wasn't what Calvin claimed. Now, the truth was undeniable. She wasn't barren. She was carrying life. Amelia gasped beside her, clutching Naomi's arm. "Oh my God, Naomi, do you hear that? You're going to be a mother!" Naomi sobbed, shaking uncontrollably. Every cruel word Calvin had ever spoken melted away under the warmth of that single truth. She whispered through her tears, "God didn't forget me." When Naomi told Ethan that evening, she was terrified. They had grown close, closer than she ever imagined, but she feared he might not be ready for such news. She found him waiting outside the shop, leaning casually against the doorframe with his usual calm smile. But when she told him, her voice trembling, his smile vanished, not out of fear, but out of shock. "Pregnant?" he repeated softly. Naomi nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't think it was possible. After everything, after all those years of pain." Her voice broke. "Ethan, I'm scared." Ethan stepped closer, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. His eyes were moist, his voice thick with emotion. "Naomi, this is a miracle. Do you understand? After everything you've been through, after all the lies, you're being given the one thing they said you'd never have." Naomi broke into sobs, collapsing into his chest. Ethan held her tightly, stroking her hair. "You're not alone," he whispered fiercely. "We'll face this together. I'll be here every step of the way." As the weeks passed, Naomi's belly grew. With it grew her joy, her confidence, her faith. She decorated a corner of Amelia's apartment with small baby clothes, tiny socks, and soft blankets. The entire neighborhood celebrated with her. Customers brought gifts, neighbors promised help, and Amelia hovered like a protective sister. But the biggest surprise came during a routine ultrasound. Naomi lay on the examination table, Ethan clutching her hand, as the doctor moved the probe across her stomach. Suddenly, the doctor's brows shot up. "Wait a moment," she murmured. Naomi's heart leapt into her throat. "Is something wrong?" The doctor smiled. "Not at all, quite the opposite. Naomi, you're carrying triplets." "Triplets?" Naomi gasped, her eyes wide. "Yes," the doctor said warmly. 3 healthy heartbeats." Ethan let out a shocked laugh, tears springing to his eyes. He squeezed Naomi's hand. 3, Naomi, do you hear that? Not 1, not 2, 3. Naomi burst into tears of joy. Her sobs filled the room, but this time they were tears of healing, of redemption. "God, you gave me more than I ever asked for." Word spread quickly. Customers at Naomi's kitchen rejoiced. Neighbors came with casseroles and blankets. Amelia cried louder than Naomi herself, dancing around the kitchen shouting, "She's having triplets, 3, take that, Calvin Brooks." But not everyone celebrated. News of Naomi's miracle reached Calvin. He was sitting in his Manhattan office, surrounded by glass walls and skyscrapers, when one of his associates scrolled through social media and said, "Isn't this your ex-wife? Look, she's pregnant. With triplets." Calvin snatched the phone. His eyes scanned the screen. There she was, Naomi, glowing, her belly already round, Ethan's arm protectively around her, Amelia grinning beside them. Triplets. His heart stopped. The phone slipped from his fingers. For years, he had blamed her. For years, he had called her barren. And now, the truth was undeniable. The problem had never been Naomi. It had been him. He sat frozen in his leather chair, the empire he had built suddenly meaningless. The laughter of his friends, the whispers of his mother, the memory of Naomi's tears, all of it came crashing down like a tidal wave. For the first time in his life, Calvin Brooks felt the true weight of shame. Meanwhile, Naomi's life blossomed. Ethan proposed to her in the simplest, most heartfelt way possible. One evening, as they sat on the floor of her shop, surrounded by paint cans and baby clothes, he took her hand. "I don't have a diamond as big as the men you once knew," he said softly, "but I have a heart that belongs only to you. Naomi, will you let me love you? Not as a rescuer, not as a replacement, but as a partner? Will you marry me?" Naomi's tears fell silently. She placed her trembling hand on his cheek and whispered, "Yes." Their wedding was small but beautiful. No chandeliers, no million-dollar halls, just a sunlit garden, close friends, Amelia dancing with joy, and Ethan standing at the altar, with tears in his eyes as Naomi walked toward him in a simple white dress. When they exchanged vows, Naomi's voice shook but carried strength. "I thought my story was over. I thought I was broken. But you reminded me that God writes the final chapter, not pain. Today, I vow to love you with everything I have, as long as I live." Ethan's voice broke as he replied, "You gave me back joy. You showed me that love isn't loud. It's steady. It's patient. It's real. Today, I vow to stand with you in every storm and in every sunrise." Amelia cheered the loudest as they kissed. Months later, Naomi gave birth to 3 healthy baby boys, the delivery room filled with cries, hers, Ethan's, Amelia's, even the nurses. The babies were laid in her arms, tiny and perfect. She kissed each forehead, whispering through tears, "You are proof. You are God's answer. You are my victory." When Ethan leaned down, his face wet with tears, Naomi whispered, "I'm not barren. I was never barren, and I will never again believe I am cursed." In that moment, as she held her sons, Naomi finally felt whole. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was a mother, she was a wife, she was loved. And somewhere across the city, Calvin Brooks sat alone in his empty penthouse, staring at the news of Naomi's miracle on his phone screen, his empire towering around him like a cage. For the first time, he realized he had lost far more than a wife. He had lost the one woman who truly loved him, and no amount of money would ever bring her back. The city of New York was buzzing with excitement. Social media feeds overflowed with photos of Naomi holding her 3 newborn sons, her face glowing with joy, Ethan by her side, and Amelia grinning proudly in the background. Headlines from local blogs read, "Once called barren, now a mother of triplets. Naomi's kitchen owner welcomes miracle babies." From rejection to redemption, Naomi's story inspires thousands. But while Naomi's name soared with admiration, Calvin Brooks sat in his glass-walled office like a man imprisoned by his own pride. His empire of real estate towers, luxury hotels, and high-rise condos stretched across the skyline, yet none of it could silence the storm raging inside him. For weeks, he avoided mirrors. When he looked at himself, he didn't see the polished millionaire anymore. He saw the face of a man who had destroyed his own happiness. Every cruel word he had hurled at Naomi replayed in his head. "You're barren. You're worthless. You're a curse." Now, with 3 innocent faces smiling in photographs, the truth screamed louder than his denial. It had never been Naomi's fault. It had been his all along. One evening, Calvin's mother, Lorraine Brooks, visited his penthouse. She was older now, her once sharp eyes dulled by regret. She carried with her a newspaper clipping showing Naomi's story. Without a word, she set it on Calvin's desk. Calvin glanced at it and looked away, his throat tight. Lorraine's voice cracked. "We were wrong, Calvin, both of us. I pushed you, I blamed her, I convinced you she was the problem. But it was us. We destroyed her." Calvin's jaw tightened. He couldn't answer. "She loved you," Lorraine whispered, tears brimming. "She gave you her youth, her loyalty, her heart, and we sent her away like trash." Calvin stood abruptly, pacing the floor. "Don't remind me," he snapped, though his voice trembled. "You need to hear it," Lorraine insisted, "because the world sees the truth now. And whether you admit it or not, you regret every step you took away from her." Calvin's fists clenched. For a moment his pride fought to rise. But then, the image of Naomi in that hospital photo, her arms full of babies, her smile radiant, broke through his defenses. His knees weakened and he sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "I ruined everything," he whispered. Lorraine's tears fell silently. "Yes, and now you must live with that truth." Meanwhile, Naomi's life was a contrast of light. Her days were filled with the cries and laughter of her triplets, Eli, Noah, and Gabriel. Ethan proved to be the father she had once prayed for, gentle, attentive, always ready to take a midnight feeding shift or rock the babies to sleep while humming quietly. Naomi often found herself watching him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered one night as Ethan held one of the boys against his chest. Ethan kissed the baby's forehead, then looked at her. "Neither did I, but sometimes God surprises us with more than we dared to hope for." Naomi smiled through tears. "I thought my story was over, but it feels like it's only just beginning." Their home was small, but it was full of laughter, warmth, and love. Amelia visited almost daily, spoiling the babies, helping Naomi in the kitchen, and teasing Ethan until he blushed. "You've become a father of 3 overnight," she laughed. "Better keep your energy up, or these boys will outpace you." Ethan grinned, bouncing one of the babies gently. "I'll keep up. I've been waiting for this my whole life." But across town, Calvin's life unraveled piece by piece. Investors began pulling out of deals. Partners distanced themselves, wary of the scandal surrounding him. Gossip spread like wildfire. Calvin Brooks, the man who blamed his wife for years, only to find out he was the problem all along. At a charity gala he attended, whispers followed him through the hall. Once people had admired him, envied him, chased his approval. Now, They avoided his gaze, some even smirking behind champagne glasses. Calvin returned home to his penthouse that night, slamming the door behind him. The silence was deafening. The lights from the city glared through the windows, but inside it felt hollow. He walked past rooms filled with expensive art, a wine cellar stocked with rare bottles, and a garage of luxury cars, but none of it filled the emptiness inside him. He poured himself a drink, but when he caught his reflection in the glass wall, he flinched. He no longer saw power. He saw loneliness. One sleepless night, Calvin found himself scrolling aimlessly through social media. He stumbled across a video clip from Naomi's kitchen. A local news station had done a feature on her story. The reporter's voice played over footage of Naomi cooking, her babies cooing in the background, Ethan helping her carry trays, once cast aside. Naomi Carter Brooks has turned her pain into purpose. With the love of her new husband and the miracle of her triplets, she is proof that strength and faith can rebuild even the most broken heart. Calvin's throat closed. He replayed the video over and over, unable to look away. The way Naomi smiled, the way Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of adoration. The way the babies reached for her, their tiny fingers curling around her hair. It should have been him. That should have been his family, but it wasn't. Because of his pride, his cruelty, his blindness, it never would be. For the first time in his life, Calvin Brooks wept. The next morning, he made a decision. He drove across town, not to reclaim Naomi. He knew she was gone forever, but to face her, to say the words he had never said. When he arrived at Naomi's kitchen, the line stretched down the block. He waited, his heart pounding, ignoring the whispers from customers who recognized him. Finally, Naomi stepped outside, carrying a tray of fresh bread. She froze when she saw him. The air shifted. Conversations hushed. "Naomi," Calvin said quietly, his voice trembling. "Please, just a word." Ethan appeared at the door instantly, protective, his hand brushing Naomi's arm. But Naomi raised a hand gently. "It's okay." She set the tray down and stepped closer, her eyes steady. "What do you want, Calvin?" Calvin swallowed hard. The words caught in his throat, but he forced them out. "I was wrong. About everything. I judged you, I shamed you, I destroyed what we had. And it was me all along. Not you. I'm so sorry." Naomi's eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. She studied him, the brokenness in his face, the hollowness in his eyes. Once she had begged for his love. Now she felt nothing but calm. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said softly. "Not for you, but for me. Because I refused to let your cruelty define the rest of my life." Calvin's shoulders shook. His voice cracked. "I don't deserve it. But thank you." Naomi gave a small nod. "Go, Calvin. Build yourself anew. But understand this, you will never have back what you lost. I've found my peace." She turned and walked back inside, Ethan's hand gently on her back. The door closed behind her, leaving Calvin standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by murmurs of strangers, his heart heavier than ever. For the first time, he understood that wealth, status, and pride meant nothing when love and family were gone, and he knew that Naomi, the woman he had once called barren, was now the richest person he had ever known. Calvin Brooks returned to his glass penthouse that evening, but it no longer felt like home. The walls of crystal and steel closed in on him, suffocating him with silence. He poured himself another drink, yet the whiskey burned without comfort. Outside, Manhattan's skyline glittered like gold, but to him it felt like mockery. For years he had built an empire brick by brick, chasing money, fame, and power. He told himself that these things would protect him, that they would make him untouchable. But standing in that empty apartment, surrounded by cold luxury, he realized the truth. His empire was a cage. He thought of Naomi, the way she had looked at him that morning, steady, calm, unshaken. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't cursed him. She had simply spoken truth. "I forgave you a long time ago, but you'll never have back what you lost." Those words haunted him more than any insult could. Meanwhile, Naomi's life overflowed with joy. The triplets grew stronger each day, Eli with his curious eyes, Noah with his endless laughter, and Gabriel with his quiet calm. Naomi often found herself awake at dawn, not because of exhaustion, but because she wanted to soak in every sound, the babies cooing, Ethan humming softly while rocking them, Amelia bustling in the kitchen preparing breakfast for everyone. Her home wasn't large. The furniture wasn't expensive, but it was alive with love. Naomi's kitchen also flourished. Customers came not only for the food, but for the story. People wanted to meet the woman who had endured rejection and found redemption. Reporters wrote articles about her, magazines requested interviews, and even small TV shows wanted her as a guest. At first, Naomi hesitated. She had lived in Calvin's shadow for too long. But Ethan encouraged her. "Your story can give hope to people who think they've been forgotten," he said gently. "You've been given this platform for a reason." And so, Naomi told her story, not with bitterness, but with grace. She spoke of pain, but also of healing. She spoke of betrayal, but also of forgiveness. Her words touched hearts across the city, across the country. Letters poured in. Women who felt unseen, men who felt broken, children who longed for families. Naomi read each letter with tears in her eyes, whispering prayers for strangers she had never met. She no longer lived for herself alone. Her story had become a beacon. Calvin watched it all from afar. He saw the news reports. He saw the glowing reviews of Naomi's kitchen. He even saw the photographs of her speaking at community events, her triplets nestled in Ethan's arms. The audience captivated by her courage. The contrast gnawed at him. Once, he had been the one on magazine covers. He had been the one people admired. But his fame had been built on money. Naomi's was built on love. And love proved far stronger. Calvin's empire began to crumble. Investors pulled out one by one, citing the damage to his reputation. Lawsuits mounted. Employees he had mistreated, tenants he had ignored, partners he had deceived. His fortune dwindled, his name stained. One by one, the people who had once praised him disappeared. His penthouse grew colder, emptier. The laughter of dinner parties, the clinking of champagne glasses, the shallow compliments, all gone. All that remained was silence. One night, Calvin sat in his darkened office staring at the skyline. For the first time in decades, he admitted aloud, "I have nothing." The confession echoed in the empty room, raw and heavy. His chest heaved, his hands trembled, and at last he broke. He wept, not the tears of a proud man hiding behind anger, but the tears of a broken soul stripped of every illusion. Hours later, when the tears stopped, Calvin did something he hadn't done in years. He knelt. Alone in his cold penthouse, he sank to the floor, bowed his head, and whispered words he had once mocked. "God, if you're still there, forgive me. Forgive the man I was. Forgive what I did to her. I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance to be better." For the first time in decades, Calvin felt something stir inside him. Not relief, not instant change, but a beginning, a flicker of humility. Weeks turned into months. Calvin sold his penthouse, his luxury cars, his art collection. Not because he was bankrupt, though his wealth had sharply declined, but because he no longer wanted them. He moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, far from the skyscrapers that once defined him. He started volunteering quietly at shelters, sweeping floors, serving food. At first, people didn't recognize him. Then when they did, whispers spread, "Isn't that Calvin Brooks, the millionaire?" But Calvin didn't flinch. He no longer cared for image. For the first time, he worked not to build his name, but to lift others. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was a step. Naomi, meanwhile, only grew stronger. Ethan's law practice expanded. Amelia continued to be her rock, and the babies filled their home with endless chaos and joy. Some nights were sleepless, some days overwhelming, but Naomi never complained. One evening, as she tucked her sons into bed, she looked at Ethan and whispered, "I used to believe my story ended the night I left Calvin. But I see now it was only the beginning." Ethan kissed her forehead. Your story is far from over, Naomi, and I'm grateful I get to be part of every chapter, Naomi smiled, her heart at peace. Yet fate wasn't done weaving their stories together. One quiet Sunday, as Naomi and Ethan pushed the triplets' stroller through the park, they saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench. His suit was plain, his face lined with exhaustion, his eyes humbled. It was Calvin. For a long moment the world seemed to freeze. Naomi's breath caught. Ethan's hand tightened on the stroller handle. Calvin looked up slowly. His eyes softened when he saw her, not with pride, not with anger, but with something else, humility, regret. He stood, his movements slow, and for the first time in his life, he bowed his head before Naomi. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. I only wanted to see the life you built, and to say thank you, because your strength showed me the man I should have been. Naomi's heart tightened. She studied him, searching his face. Once she had begged for his love. Now she felt only compassion. You're right, she said softly. You weren't that man, but maybe you can still become him. Calvin's lips trembled. He nodded, tears brimming. I'm trying. Naomi gave a small nod, her voice gentle. Then keep trying. With that, she turned back to Ethan, her hand sliding into his. Together they walked away, their children giggling in the stroller. Calvin stood watching, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of wealth. Not buildings, not money, not status, love, family, forgiveness. And though he had lost Naomi forever, her strength had given him a chance to rebuild himself. For Naomi, it was the closing of a chapter. For Calvin, it was the beginning of one. The winter in New York came heavy that year, the kind of cold that made even the rich wrap their coats tighter and the homeless huddle closer under thin blankets. The streets glistened with ice, Christmas lights blinked from apartment windows, and carolers sang at the corners. For Naomi, it was the most beautiful season of her life. For Calvin, it was the hardest. Naomi's world was overflowing. Her triplets were now walking, stumbling through the house with laughter that echoed in every corner. Eli, bold and adventurous, was always the first to run toward trouble. Noah, mischievous and loud, found joy in climbing furniture and hiding toys. Gabriel, quiet but wise beyond his age, watched his brothers and followed them like a shadow. Every evening, Ethan would come home from his law office, scoop the boys into his arms, and let them climb all over him, while Naomi watched with a smile that still surprised her. She often found herself whispering, "Thank you, God. I thought I was barren. And now you gave me this." Her restaurant had doubled in size. What started as a corner food stand was now a bustling cafe, with long lines of customers every morning. College students came for her cheap but hearty breakfasts. Office workers stopped by during lunch breaks, and families filled the place on weekends. People called it Naomi's Kitchen of Hope, and in a way, it had become more than a restaurant. It was a place where broken people came to find warmth, not just in food, but in story. Naomi began hosting monthly dinners for single mothers, offering them free meals and a safe space to share their struggles. She told them her own journey, and many of them cried, saying, "You gave me courage to go on." Ethan supported her in everything. He often said, "Your food fills their stomachs, Naomi, but your story fills their hearts." Far across town, Calvin was living a very different life. The man who once owned skyscrapers was now renting a modest two-bedroom apartment in Queens. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the furniture second-hand. But for the first time, Calvin didn't complain. He no longer spent his days at banquets or in boardrooms. Instead, he worked quietly at a local shelter, mopping floors, carrying boxes of donated clothes, and serving food to the hungry. At first, people mocked him. Volunteers whispered, "Isn't that Calvin Brooks, the real estate king?" Some laughed, others sneered, but Calvin didn't defend himself. He simply kept working. Day after day, he served. He met a war veteran who lived under a bridge. He met a teenage runaway with bruises on her arms. He met a single father who had lost everything in a fire. Each story cut into Calvin's heart. For the first time in his life, he listened, not to strike a deal, not to make a profit, but to truly hear late at night, He would sit alone in his apartment, journal open, writing down what he had learned. Pride makes you deaf to truth. Money cannot replace the sound of laughter in a home. Forgiveness is wealth greater than gold. His body grew lean, his face weathered, but his heart slowly softened. One snowy evening, the shelter organized a Christmas event for children. Volunteers decorated the hall with paper stars, painted candy canes, and hung cheap lights across the walls. Calvin found himself dressed as Santa Claus, handing out small donated toys. At first he felt foolish. The man who once owned luxury cars was now wearing a fake beard and red suit. But then a little girl climbed onto his lap. She had tangled hair and wide, innocent eyes. She whispered, "Santa, can I ask you something?" "What is it, sweetheart?" Calvin asked gently. "Can you give me a daddy for Christmas?" she said. "My mommy cries at night because she's alone." Calvin's chest tightened. He had no answer. His vision blurred with tears. All he could say was, "I'll pray for you, darling." That night, when he got home, he fell to his knees again. God," he whispered, "give her what I could not give my own wife. Give these children what I never gave mine. Heal what I broke." Meanwhile, Naomi's life reached new heights. On Christmas Eve, her restaurant hosted its biggest event yet, free dinner for anyone who had nowhere to go. The cafe was packed. Homeless men sat beside wealthy businesswomen. Children played together without asking who was rich or poor. Ethan and Amelia helped serve plates, while Naomi moved from table to table, hugging people, laughing with them, listening to their stories. When the clock struck midnight, the triplets, wearing tiny Christmas sweaters, sang Silent Night with the help of Amelia. The entire room erupted into applause, and Naomi felt her heart swell with joy so pure she thought it might burst. Later that night, when the cafe was quiet again, Naomi and Ethan sat by the fireplace with their children asleep on a blanket nearby. Naomi whispered, "This is the life I prayed for. Her family, love, purpose." Ethan kissed her hand. "And this is only the beginning. But life has a way of weaving unexpected threads." In early spring, Naomi was invited to speak at a community center downtown. She agreed, not knowing that across the city, Calvin had also been asked to share his journey with a group of recovering addicts at the same center. The day of the event, their paths crossed again. Naomi entered the hall, her children in Ethan's care for the afternoon, and walked toward the stage. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back, her smile radiant. The audience clapped, eager to hear her story. Calvin, standing near the back, froze when he saw her. His breath caught, his chest ached. He had seen her in the park months ago, but now, seeing her stand tall, her voice steady, her spirit shining, he realized just how far she had risen and how far he had fallen. Naomi noticed him too. For a moment their eyes met. She felt no anger, no hatred, only the quiet weight of a history that had been both bitter and redemptive. She began her speech. She spoke of betrayal, of pain, of being cast aside. She spoke of finding strength in God, of rebuilding, of love reborn in Ethan and in her children. She spoke of forgiveness, not as something easy, but as something necessary for peace. The crowd wiped tears. They clapped. They cheered. When she stepped down, Calvin remained frozen. His hands trembled. Finally, he gathered courage and approached her quietly. "Naomi," he said softly. She turned, her expression calm. "Calvin, His voice cracked. "I came to share my story today, too. But after hearing yours, I think mine is just a shadow compared to your light." Naomi shook her head gently. "Every story matters, Calvin. Even yours. What matters is what you do with it now." Calvin swallowed hard. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Naomi's eyes softened. "I forgave you long ago. Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about freeing yourself from chains." For the first time, Calvin's shoulders relaxed. Tears filled his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Thank you," Naomi smiled faintly. "Now go tell your story. There are people who need to hear it." That day marked the start of Calvin's transformation into something more than a fallen tycoon. He began speaking openly about his failures, How pride destroyed his marriage, how selfishness cost him love, how blindness to truth left him barren in every sense of the word, and strangely, people listened. Not to mock him, but to learn. He never regained his wealth, but he gained something else, purpose. As for Naomi, her journey only deepened. Ethan surprised her on their anniversary with a new space downtown, a large building that would become Naomi's kitchen and hope center. Not just a restaurant, but a hub for single mothers, abandoned children, and struggling families. When Naomi saw it, tears filled her eyes. "This is bigger than me." Ethan hugged her. "Yes, but it's exactly what you were meant to do." Together, they walked inside, their triplets running ahead, their laughter echoing through the empty hall that would soon be filled with love. And so, two lives that once collided in pain now walked separate roads, one glowing with joy, the other humbled into service. Naomi was no longer the broken woman thrown out of a mansion. She was a mother, a wife, a leader, a beacon of hope. Calvin was no longer the untouchable millionaire. He was a man stripped bare, learning slowly what it meant to be human. Their stories no longer bound them in bitterness, but in a strange, silent truth. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is not a second chance with you, but a second chance with themselves.